The Vraxian hunting packs had ruled the galactic frontier for 17,000 cycles, and Karex the bloodied wore that legacy in the scars that crisscrossed his armored hide. He stood 9 feet of corded muscle and predatory grace, his triple-jointed limbs designed by evolution for the killing strike, his sensory organs capable of detecting fear set across a kilometer of vacuum-sealed corridor. His species had evolved on Vraxis Prime, a world classified as Death World Category 7, where the gravity crushed weaker species into paste, and the wildlife had developed hunting strategies that would give nightmares to xenobiologists. The Vraxians had climbed to the top of their food chain by being faster, stronger, and more vicious than anything else that drew breath on their hellish planet. When they reached the stars, they discovered the rest of the galaxy was soft, weak, evolved on gentle worlds where predation meant something that happened to other species. The Vraxians became the enforcers, the mercenaries, the hunters that civilized species hired when they needed violence done properly. Karex had killed members of 43 different species in his career. He'd hunted the crystalline Shelnari through methane storms on their frozen moon colonies. He'd tracked the telepathic mind weavers through asteroid fields where they thought their mental camouflage made them invisible. He'd even brought down a rogue Corthanian warbeast, a creature 15 meters tall that had been genetically engineered as a living weapon. Each kill had added to his reputation. Each contract had proven what every Vraxian knew in their predatory hearts. They were the apex, the ultimate expression of evolutionary violence that the galaxy's safer worlds could never hope to match. When the call came from the Galactic Council about a new species that needed to be contained, Karex accepted with the bored confidence of a hunter who had never met prey that could challenge him. The species was called human, from a planet designated Earth, and the briefing was refreshingly straightforward. They'd made first contact 6 months prior, establishing trade relations with the Rim worlds before expanding too aggressively into territories claimed by the Syndicate Collective. The Syndicate wanted them taught a lesson, wanted their expansion stopped, wanted their most prominent colony on the world called New Vancouver turned into an example that would convince the humans to respect established boundaries. It was work the Vraxians had done 100 times before: arrive with overwhelming force, demonstrate superior lethality, accept the inevitable surrender. The contract specified non-extinction protocols, which Karex found almost insulting. His pack didn't commit genocide. They were hunters, not butchers. They would kill enough humans to break their spirit, leave enough alive to carry the lesson back to Earth, and collect their payment. Simple, clean, professional. Karex assembled his finest pack for the operation. 20 Vraxian hunters, each one a veteran of multiple campaigns, each one carrying weapons designed to kill efficiently across a variety of environmental conditions. They approached New Vancouver in stealth configuration, their ship's sensors painting a picture of a colony world with roughly 2 million human inhabitants. The preliminary scan showed a species that was physically unremarkable, bipedal, averaging 6 feet in height, minimal natural armor, no claws or venom systems, eyesight limited to a narrow spectrum. They developed advanced technology, certainly, but their biology suggested they'd evolved as persistence hunters on a relatively mild world, probably somewhere in the Death World Category 2 or 3 range. Easy prey. Karex studied the sensor data and felt something almost like disappointment. He'd hoped for more of a challenge from a species bold enough to challenge Syndicate territory. The pack made planetfall in the northern wilderness outside the main colony, landing in terrain the sensors classified as temperate forest. Karex emerged from the ship and immediately noticed something wrong. The gravity was punishing, nearly 15% higher than Vraxian standard, enough to make movement require conscious effort. The atmospheric oxygen content was so rich it made his head spin until his systems adjusted. The local wildlife sounds filtering through the trees carried an aggressive edge that suggested a competitive ecosystem. He accessed the planetary database and felt his predatory instincts suddenly wake from their bored slumber. Earth wasn't Category 2 or 3. The planet humans called home was classified as Death World Category 9, a rating so extreme that only 4 other known worlds had ever achieved it. Vraxis Prime, the planet that had forged the galaxy's most feared predators, was Category 7. Humans had evolved on a world more hostile than the one that created the Vraxians, and somehow the preliminary briefing had failed to mention this critical fact. Carex stood in the forest of New Vancouver, feeling genuine unease for the first time in decades, and wondered what kind of predators a Category 9 death world would produce. He was about to find out. The human hunting party found them before Carex's pack had moved a kilometer from the landing site. They didn't announce themselves with challenges or demands for surrender. They simply opened fire from concealed positions that the Vraxian sensors hadn't detected, using weapons that punched through combat armor with terrifying efficiency. Carex's second-in-command, Thrakor the Swift, took a round through his primary heart and dropped without even seeing his killer. The pack scattered, falling back on instincts honed through thousands of years of evolution, seeking cover and trying to locate their attackers. But the humans moved through their own forest like ghosts, using the terrain with an intimate knowledge that spoke of apex predators hunting on familiar ground. Carex caught a glimpse of one, a human female, maybe 5.5 feet tall, wearing camouflage that adapted to the environment, moving through the undergrowth with economy of motion that set eyes through his predatory heart. She looked directly at him, and he saw something in her eyes that he'd only ever seen in mirrors. The absolute confidence of a species that had never learned to be prey. The human they eventually captured was named Sarah Chun, and she didn't show fear even with 4 Vraxian hunters pinning her to the ground, their claws drawing blood from her shoulders. Carex had lost 7 pack members in the firefight that led to her capture, 7 apex predators killed by a human hunting party that had numbered only 12. The survivors had retreated into the forest like shadows, refusing to stand and fight, picking off Vraxians from impossible distances with weapons that seemed to track movement through solid cover. Sarachin had been the bait, deliberately exposing herself to draw the pack into an ambush that had killed 3 more of his hunters before they'd managed to overwhelm her through sheer numbers. Now she lay in the dirt of her colony world, bleeding from multiple wounds, and she was smiling. Carex demanded answers in Galactic Standard, his translator converting his guttural Vraxian into something the human could understand. He wanted to know how a species so physically unremarkable had killed veteran Vraxian hunters, how they'd detected his pack's approach, how they'd set up ambushes that had anticipated his tactics before he'd even implemented them. Sarachin responded in perfect Galactic Standard, her voice steady despite the pain of her injuries. She told him that New Vancouver wasn't a civilian colony. It was settled primarily by former military personnel from Earth's various armed forces, people who'd spent careers learning to hunt the most dangerous prey in the galaxy, other humans. She explained that humans had been apex predators on a world so hostile that their evolution had favored intelligence and adaptability over physical advantages, that they'd learned to hunt creatures stronger and faster than themselves by being smarter and more ruthless. Carex listened and felt his understanding of galactic hierarchy shifting. The Vraxians had assumed their physical advantages made them superior hunters, that their strength and speed and natural weapons meant they sat at the apex of the predatory pyramid. But humans had evolved on a world where being the strongest didn't guarantee survival, where the ability to outthink your prey mattered more than the ability to overpower it. They developed persistence hunting, tracking prey for days until exhaustion made the kill trivial. They developed pack tactics that involved complex coordination and communication. They developed the ability to learn from every encounter, to adapt their strategies, to turn every defeat into information that made them more dangerous. And then, Sarah explained with that disturbing smile, they turned all those hunting instincts on each other, spending 10,000 years perfecting the art of warfare against opponents just as intelligent and adaptable as themselves. The pack's medical officer examined Sarah's wounds and delivered news that fundamentally violated Carex's understanding of biology. She was healing. Not slowly, the way most species recovered from trauma, but actively, her body's immune system working at a pace that should have been impossible for a creature her size. The deep lacerations from Vraxian claws were already beginning to close, her blood clotting with remarkable efficiency, her body's shock response keeping her conscious and functional despite injuries that should have rendered her delirious. The medical officer explained in hushed tones that human healing factors were absurdly robust, evolved on a world where injuries were so common that slow recovery meant death. They could survive blood loss that would kill most species, could function through pain that would incapacitate Vraxians, could recover from wounds in days that would take other species months to heal. Carex made the decision to withdraw, to return to the ship and request additional pack support before attempting to assault the colony proper. It was a tactical retreat, the kind of maneuver that preserved Hunter assets for more favorable engagements. He ordered Sarah Chin restrained and brought aboard as a prisoner, both for intelligence purposes and as potential leverage in negotiations. The pack moved through the forest in defensive formation, sensors at maximum sensitivity, expecting ambush at every turn. The attack came 3 kilometers from the landing site, and it wasn't subtle. 40 humans emerged from concealment simultaneously, armed with weapons ranging from standard kinetic rifles to what appeared to be homemade explosives. They didn't demand surrender. They didn't offer terms. They simply attacked with a ferocity that Carex had only encountered in cornered prey animals fighting for survival. Except humans weren't prey animals. They advanced into Vraxian fire with tactical discipline that spoke of extensive training, using suppression and maneuver in combinations that kept the pack off balance. When Vraxians fell back, humans pursued. When Vraxians tried to establish defensive positions, humans flanked them. Carex found himself fighting in close quarters against a human male who moved with economy and precision, blocking strikes that should have been too fast to see, targeting weak points in Vraxian anatomy with disturbing accuracy. The human took a claw strike across the ribs that opened a wound deep enough to expose bone, and he just kept fighting, his face twisted in pain, but his movements still controlled and purposeful. Carex finally brought him down with a strike that shattered his leg, but even crippled, the human drew a sidearm and put 2 rounds into another Vraxian before someone finally shot him. The pack reached their ship with 6 hunters remaining from the original 20. Sarachin had escaped during the fighting, slipping her restraints with a flexibility that suggested humans possessed joints that could dislocate and relocate at will. Carex sat in the command chair, his armor scored and dented, his pack decimated, and accessed the full Earth database that his preliminary briefing had somehow failed to include. What he read made his predatory blood run cold. Humans didn't just evolve on a Category 9 death world. They'd thrive there, becoming the dominant species not through physical advantages, but through relentless adaptability and pack coordination. They'd domesticated other apex predators, turning wolves into dogs that served human purposes. They'd driven dozens of megafauna species to extinction through hunting strategies that emphasized persistence and planning. And then, when they ran out of other predators to compete with, they'd spent millennia hunting each other, developing warfare into an art form that made Vraxian combat doctrine look primitive by comparison. The Syndicate Collective refused to believe Carex's initial report. The species that had hired his pack to teach humans a lesson couldn't accept that Vraxian hunters, the apex predators of known space, had been beaten by a species whose preliminary biological assessment suggested they should have been easy prey. They demanded proof, witnesses, evidence that CAREX hadn't simply failed due to poor tactics or inadequate preparation. So CAREX provided them with combat footage from his pack's armor systems, showing Vraxian veterans being outmaneuvered and killed by humans who moved through their own terrain with the confidence of apex predators defending their territory. He showed them thermal imagery of human hunters approaching Vraxian positions from angles the sensor said should have been impassable. He showed them the moment when Sarah Chun, restrained and bleeding from multiple wounds, had smiled at her captors with the absolute certainty of someone who knew rescue was coming. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to review Earth's Death World classification and reassess the threat level humanity represented. Xenobiologists who'd spent careers studying predator evolution examined human anatomy and physiology with growing alarm. They noted the forward-facing eyes optimized for depth perception during pursuit. They observed the persistence endurance systems that allowed humans to run prey to exhaustion over distances that would kill most species. They studied the human hand, that remarkable manipulation appendage with opposable thumb, capable of crafting tools and weapons with extraordinary precision. They analyzed human pack bonding behaviors, the way humans form tight social groups with complex loyalty structures, the way they coordinated action through verbal and nonverbal communication with remarkable efficiency. Dr. Thelnara, a Kreshnian xenobiologist who'd published 17 papers on predator evolution, presented findings that horrified the assembled council. Humans, she explained, were arguably the most successful predator species in galactic history, not despite their relatively modest physical attributes, but because of them. Their evolutionary path had prioritized cognitive development over physical specialization, creating a predator that could adapt to virtually any environment, could learn to hunt virtually any prey, could develop strategies and tools specific to each challenge. Their death world hadn't just created another strong species. It had created a species whose primary survival trait was the ability to become whatever kind of predator the situation required. The Council requested a diplomatic meeting with Earth's representatives, hoping to establish protocols that would prevent further conflict. The human delegation arrived in a modest ship, led by Ambassador Rebecca Torres, a woman who'd served 20 years in Earth's military before transitioning to diplomatic service. She listened patiently as Council representatives explained their concerns about human expansion, about the need for established species to maintain their territorial claims, about the importance of respecting boundaries that had been set through millennia of careful negotiation. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of someone who had seen combat and understood exactly what her species was capable of. She explained that humanity had no interest in conquest or subjugation, that Earth's expansion was driven by population pressure and the need for resources, not imperial ambitions. But she also made it clear that humans would defend their colonies with the full force of their military capabilities, and that hiring Vraxian hunters to attack civilian settlements was an act of war that humanity was fully prepared to answer. The council members exchanged glances, and CAREX, attending as an expert witness, saw the fear in their eyes. These were species from gentle worlds, civilizations that had developed in relative safety and had come to depend on species like the Vraxians to handle violence on their behalf. They'd built a galactic order based on the assumption that physical might determine military hierarchy, that the species with the strongest soldiers and the deadliest hunters would naturally dominate. Humanity violated that assumption. Humans weren't the strongest or the fastest or the most naturally armed. But they'd evolved to hunt creatures that were all those things, had spent their evolutionary history developing strategies to kill prey that outmatched them physically, and had then turned those strategies into systematic warfare against opponents just as clever as themselves. Ambassador Torres presented the Council with Earth's terms: formal recognition of all established human colonies, compensation for the New Vancouver attack, and a guarantee that no further military action would be taken against human settlements. In exchange, humanity would respect existing territorial boundaries and agree to participate in council arbitration for future disputes. The terms were reasonable, even generous, considering humanity could have demanded far more after repelling the Vraxian attack. But Torres made one thing absolutely clear: if any species attempted another assault on human colonies, Earth's response would be swift, comprehensive, and would demonstrate exactly why a Category 9 death world produces the galaxy's most effective predators. The Council voted unanimously to accept humanity's terms. They'd seen the combat footage, had studied the biological assessments, had listened to Carex's testimony about watching his elite pack get systematically destroyed by human hunters defending their territory. They understood, perhaps for the first time, that being apex predators on your own world didn't mean you sat at the top of the galactic food chain. Carex returned to Vraxis Prime carrying shame like a physical weight. His pack had been annihilated, his reputation as an undefeated hunter shattered, his species' claim to apex status fundamentally challenged. The Hunters' Council convened to review his performance, to determine whether his failure resulted from tactical errors or represented something more fundamental. They examined every second of combat footage, analyzed every decision, evaluated every engagement against established Vraxian doctrine. Their conclusion was unequivocal: Carex had performed flawlessly according to Vraxian standards. The problem wasn't his tactics. The problem was that humans operated according to entirely different principles that Vraxian evolution hadn't prepared them to counter. The Hunters' Council invited human military advisors to Vraxis Prime, an unprecedented admission that the galaxy's premier predator species needed to learn from someone else. The humans who arrived were instructors from Earth's various special operations communities, men and women who had spent careers studying asymmetric warfare, counterinsurgency, and advanced tactical doctrine. They spent 6 months teaching Vraxian hunters how humans approached combat. The emphasis on intelligence gathering and reconnaissance, the importance of understanding terrain and using it to maximum advantage, the value of patience and misdirection over brute force assaults. The Vraxians learned, grudgingly at first, then with growing respect as they realized just how sophisticated human warfare had become. Commander James Mitchell, a human instructor who'd served with Earth's Marine Raiders, explained the fundamental difference between Vraxian and human approaches to combat. Vraxians, he said, hunted like alpha predators. They relied on superior physical capabilities and direct confrontation, overwhelming prey through strength and ferocity. Humans hunted like opportunistic predators. They studied their targets, identified weaknesses, created advantages through preparation and positioning, and struck when conditions favored success. Neither approach was inherently superior, but human tactics had been refined through 10,000 years of warfare against opponents who could think and adapt just as well as they could. Every human military engagement became a learning experience. Every defeat generated lessons that made the next engagement more effective. Carex participated in the training exercises, pitting his enhanced capabilities against human instructors in controlled combat scenarios. He discovered, to his profound frustration, that physical advantages meant remarkably little when the opposition refused to fight on your terms. Humans used terrain to negate his strength. They used misdirection to counter his speed. They set traps that exploited his aggressive instincts, turning Vraxian hunting behavior into a liability. In one memorable exercise, Carex tracked a human instructor named Sarah Chin through a simulated forest environment, using every enhanced sense evolution had given him. He found her trail easily enough, followed it with confidence, and walked directly into a deadfall trap that would have crushed him if the safety systems hadn't prevented actual injury. Sarah emerged from concealment, not where her trail led but positioned to observe the trap, and explained that humans had been using false trails to fool predators for 50,000 years. The turning point came during a joint operation 6 months after the training program began. A rogue element of the Syndicate Collective, refusing to accept the Council's peace terms with humanity, hired a mercenary company to raid human shipping lanes in the frontier sectors. The Galactic Council authorized a joint Vraxian-human task force to eliminate the threat, hoping to demonstrate that cooperation between predator species could be more effective than competition. Carex commanded the Vraxian element, while Commander Mitchell led the human forces. They planned the operation together, combining Vraxian physical capabilities with human tactical sophistication, creating a hybrid doctrine that leveraged the strengths of both species. The operation was a devastating success. Vraxian hunters provided the shock assault capability, hitting the mercenary base with overwhelming force, while human operators handled reconnaissance, established fire support positions, and cut off escape routes. The mercenaries, expecting either Vraxian-style frontal assault or human-style guerrilla tactics, were unprepared for a coordinated attack that combined both approaches. The base fell in 4 hours with minimal casualties on the task force side. Carex and Mitchell stood together in the aftermath, surveying the successful operation, and Carex finally understood what humanity represented to the Galactic Order. They weren't just another predator species. They were predators who'd learned to hunt in packs with other predators, who could adapt their tactics to complement allies rather than compete with them, who understood that cooperation could create advantages that individual strength never could. The Joint Task Force became permanent, establishing a precedent that would reshape galactic military doctrine. Other species began requesting human advisors, wanting to learn the tactical sophistication that had allowed a physically unremarkable species to challenge the Vraxians. The humans shared their knowledge freely, understanding that an educated galaxy was safer for everyone. They taught the crystalline Shelnari how to use their natural camouflage abilities more effectively. They showed the Corthanian war beasts how to coordinate pack attacks with devastating efficiency. They trained the telepathic mind weavers in counterintelligence and deception techniques that leveraged their mental abilities. And slowly, grudgingly, the galaxy's other predator species learned what the Vraxians had discovered through painful experience. That humanity had been forged in a crucible more intense than any other known world, and that crucible had created predators whose greatest strength wasn't their claws or their strength, but their minds. 3 years after the Battle of New Vancouver, the Galactic Council formally reclassified humanity's threat assessment from expansionist species requiring containment to Apex Cooperative Predator Strategic Alliance recommended. The change reflected a fundamental shift in how the galaxy understood predatory hierarchy. Physical dominance, the Council acknowledged, was only one dimension of predatory success. Humans had demonstrated that cognitive sophistication, tactical flexibility, and the ability to coordinate with other species could be equally valuable traits. The galaxy's existing predator species had built their reputations on individual excellence. Humanity was building something different, a network of cooperative predators who could combine their unique capabilities to handle threats beyond any single species' abilities. Ambassador Torres stood before the Council and presented Earth's proposal for a new galactic security framework. Instead of relying on a few dominant predator species to enforce order through threat of violence, she suggested creating integrated task forces that drew on the strengths of multiple species. Vraxian physical capabilities combined with human tactical doctrine. Shelnari stealth abilities coordinated with Corthanian shock assault. Mind-weaver intelligence gathering supported by human analytical methods. The proposal was radical, suggesting that cooperation between predators could be more effective than competition, that the future of galactic security lay in leveraging diversity rather than establishing dominance hierarchies. The vote was closer than Carex expected, with several species expressing concerns that humans were attempting to establish a different kind of dominance through diplomacy rather than force. But ultimately, the Council approved the framework by a substantial margin. Too many species had seen the joint task force operations, had witnessed what happened when predators stopped competing and started collaborating. The results were undeniable. Piracy in the frontier sectors had dropped by 70%. Territorial disputes that would have escalated to violence were being resolved through arbitration backed by credible multi-species enforcement capability. The galaxy was becoming safer, not through the threat of overwhelming force from a single dominant species, but through coordinated action by multiple predator species working toward common goals. Carex accepted command of the first fully integrated Predator Core unit, a force combining Vraxian, human, Shelnari, and Corthanian elements. His second-in-command was Sarah Chin, promoted to commander after her actions defending New Vancouver and her subsequent work as a military instructor on Vraxis Prime. They developed a mutual respect born from combat and training, predators who'd learned to recognize each other's capabilities without the need for dominance displays. Their unit deployed to the galactic frontier, handling situations that required the unique combination of capabilities that only integrated predator forces could provide. They hunted pirates, who thought they could evade single-species pursuit forces. They secured contested territories, where the presence of multiple predator species deterred opportunistic aggression. They responded to emergencies that required both overwhelming force and tactical precision. The galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be apex predators evolved through these operations. The Vraxians learned that being the strongest didn't automatically make you the most effective, that humans with their sophisticated tactics could achieve results that brute force never could. The humans learned that their cognitive advantages could be enhanced by working with species who possess superior physical capabilities, that Vraxian strength combined with human playing created synergies neither species could achieve alone. The other predator species learned that cooperation didn't diminish their individual excellence but amplified it, that working together made all of them more formidable than they'd been in isolation. Carex stood on the bridge of the Predator Core flagship Unified Talon, watching his integrated crew work with seamless efficiency, and reflected on how far his understanding had evolved since the disastrous operation on New Vancouver. He'd gone to Earth's colony expecting to teach primitive prey animals their place in the galactic hierarchy. Instead, he'd learned that hierarchy was more complex than simple physical dominance, that apex predators came in forms his evolution hadn't prepared him to recognize. Humans had shattered the Vraxian assumption that being the strongest made you the apex, had demonstrated that intelligence and adaptability could trump physical advantages, had shown the galaxy that the most dangerous predators were the ones who could think their way through problems that strength alone couldn't solve. Commander Chen joined him on the bridge, reviewing the latest intelligence reports from frontier sectors. They received a request for assistance from a colony world facing raids from an unknown species, something that apparently combined stealth capabilities, pack coordination, and aggressive territorial behavior. It was exactly the kind of challenge that required integrated predator response, combining human analytical skills with Vraxian combat capabilities and Shelnari reconnaissance abilities. Carex felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine excitement at facing worthy opposition. Not because he wanted to prove Vraxian superiority, but because he wanted to test how effective predator cooperation had become, wanted to demonstrate what happened when apex species stopped competing for dominance and started hunting together. The galaxy's Deathworld predators had thought they were the apex, had built their identities around being the most dangerous species in known space. Then Earthlings arrived, physically unremarkable primates from a Category 9 hell world, and taught everyone a lesson that would reshape galactic civilization. Being Apex wasn't about being the strongest, or the fastest, or the most heavily armed. Being Apex was about adapting to any challenge, about learning from every encounter, about recognizing that cooperation could create advantages that individual excellence never could. The Vraxians had been apex predators on their world. Humans had been apex predators on a world far more hostile. But together, working with other predator species, they were becoming something unprecedented in galactic history. Cooperative apex predators, who understood that the real test of evolutionary success wasn't defeating your competitors, but learning to work with them. The galaxy had been built on the assumption that might made right, that the strongest species would naturally dominate. Humanity had arrived and asked a simple question: what if there was a better way? 3 years later, watching integrated predator forces operate with devastating efficiency across the frontier, Carex knew the answer. There was a better way. And it started with recognizing that apex predators came in many forms, and the smartest predators were the ones who learned to hunt together,